Hello and welcome back to the Anything Liverpool YouTube channel. Today we've got a very, very special stream. We're joined by Ryder of the Chronicle. Lee, how you doing today, mate?
I'm doing fine, thank you very much. Thanks for having me on. It's been a bit busy, but we feel like both clubs are now getting to where they want to be in the window. So yeah, it's an exciting time for the Premier League in terms of transfers right now.
Yeah, definitely. We were speaking before. Obviously, Nick Wattermolder's currently on Tyneside doing his medical. I'm sure we'll kind of get into that more, but it's 3 days left of the transfer window. Doesn't seem like Liverpool and Newcastle's business are done. So I think especially for Newcastle, you got a few busy days ahead of you.
Yeah, I mean that's from the offset. We knew it was going to be a big transfer window for Newcastle. As you know, the last few windows for Newcastle were like barren windows. There was not a lot of transfer activity going on. Newcastle were very much restricted with PSR issues. They couldn't spend too much, but this window has been totally different. But we've also had the added drama of Alexander Isak wanting to go. So yeah, it's been extremely busy.
Yeah, definitely. As we kind of mentioned there, obviously Nick Wattermolder's very close to joining Newcastle. I think the fee is around 80 million euros, 70-ish million pound. We'll just jump straight into it because I think it's what everybody wants to know. Does this open the door for Alexander Isak joining? I know there's been a lot of obviously reports that Newcastle want to. From kind of my point of view, is obviously we're an aggregator channel. We take news from everybody. There seems to be a lot of people who are on the bus that one signing might make the Alexander Isak deal happen, or it's two. From your point of view, do you think due to Wattermolder's price, kind of what's been happening this season, is the door well and truly open, as a lot of people like to use that metaphor, the door?
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's almost like, I mean, to use another sort of metaphor, it's almost like Alexander Isak is in the departure lounge now, waiting for his flight. And the flight, if it turns up, will be Liverpool coming up with the correct bid, which, there's been lots of talk of 150 million in the summer, but I personally don't think it's going to be that much. I've seen some reports today, sort of from the Northwest, talking about perhaps 130 million. I would say that would be probably tempting to Newcastle now, especially with at least one player coming in. Do I think another striker will come in on top of that? I know that they are actively trying to sign that second striker, and it feels like that would trigger Isak being able to go. But none of this can happen until Liverpool come forward with a bid. I mean, if you remember on August the 1st, the bid came in, it was rejected straight away. And then I don't know if the Liverpool journalists got briefed that there wasn't going to be another bid. Was that a tactic? I guess the proof will now be in the pudding in the next few days.
Yeah, I mean, another thing that kind of again see a lot of sources reporting differently is that Wattermolder is. I mean, I think it's absolutely ridiculous when I'm saying this out loud that Wattermolder is a Callum Wilson replacement. Now, won't say he's reported that. I think we all know. From your kind of point of view, do you think that's realistic, or is that kind of maybe Newcastle sources trying to potentially save face and be like, look, we are getting two in, even though Wattermolder might not be a Wilson replacement because obviously he only played 400 minutes last season in the Premier League, that maybe Wattermolder's the Isaac replacement and then maybe Wisser or somebody else comes in. It's, for me, Wattermolder, it just, from my point of view, it doesn't make sense. Is that kind of how you're looking at it, or is he definitely an Isaac replacement?
Well, I was told the other day when Newcastle were talking about signing Strand Larsen from Wolves, which I believe is still active, that he would be the player deemed as the Wilson replacement. So obviously Walter Melde today is on Tyneside. I don't think he's Callum Wilson's replacement. But going off what I've been told on the record by Eddie Howe this morning at the press conference, he basically said that he doesn't categorise anyone as anybody's replacement. I think he just wants to sign 2 strikers. And I mean, if they did sign the 2 players we've just been speaking about there, then that would be a 6'6" striker and a 6'4" striker coming in. It would just change the dimension for Newcastle in terms of physicality and power. And I don't think that Eddie Howe is the type of manager to sort of pigeonhole anybody. So the answer really to your question is probably that Valderrama coming in is probably going to be Isak's replacement, if that makes sense. So, and I can fully see whoever comes in, they might even be having a little fight over the number 9 shirt because that's available at the minute. So, that doesn't get much more prestigious than that for Newcastle fans.
Yeah, definitely. I think as well with obviously Newcastle being in the Champions League now, Liverpool seem to want to do it with Ekitike and Isaac, having 2 top number 9s who can, maybe fight for that position. And, Wattermolder as well, from what I can see, he can play deeper. He kind of looks like he can maybe play in a false 9 role. And we know obviously Visser as well can play on the wing. So I think a lot of people have, from my point of view, a lot of people have maybe, as you said, pigeonholed it. This player's coming in for this player, this player's coming in for this player, when top clubs nowadays maybe aren't doing that. They're looking more at numbers. And I mean, that's what I think Eddie Howe's doing. I'm not sure about yourself, but it's
I do. Yeah, I think Eddie Howe's made the reference before about two 11s, having at least 2 players fighting for every position. I think that's what he's trying to get to. I think you've obviously got that at Liverpool now. I mean, going back in the day at Liverpool, you could probably reel off in the 80s and 90s, you could reel off the 11 just off the top of your head every week. It was just the same 11 players playing all the time. The game has moved on, obviously, massively since then. And it is all about the squad game. It is all about the numbers. Newcastle could not afford to have sold Isak in this window and not replaced him. It's just not feasible. And if anything did end up holding it up, it would be because they're not going to get the 2 strikers in. Hopefully, from Newcastle's point of view, that is the case because they obviously need to draw a line under the Isak situation now. But yeah, it's all about the numbers, as you say.
Yeah, again, we've kind of spoke about Wissa a little bit there. Obviously, nothing's a certainty in football, and it'd be, anything can happen. I think, we've learned that over this summer transfer alone. But if a Wissa or a Strand Larson or even somebody else, obviously Wattermada came out of nowhere and was seemingly done within the space of a couple of hours. If another forward does come in, can that basically be Isaac 100% leaving?
I mean, you would have to look at it from the narrative we've had so far. You would have to look at it going off what Eddie Howe said last week. So if you kind of like flip it the other way, Eddie Howe said 7 days ago to me in the press conference, Isak won't be going anywhere unless he's replaced. We cannot kick off the season without a recognised centre forward. To then get 2 recognised centre forwards in and Isak to stay, that doesn't make sense. So yes, I think you're probably pushing the right way with that. But again, it really does boil down to Liverpool now and whether they put that bid in. And, it feels logical that they will. And it just feels like it's a matter of time now.
Yeah, and we've obviously spoke about it before, the kind of prices that are going around. 150 million seem to be brandished by a lot of sources close to Newcastle that they would want in excess of that. Obviously, that was maybe before Alexander Isak publicly pushed for a move, which obviously it logically would make the price go down. A player doesn't want to be there. He's kind of pushing, not training. We've seen the likes of, obviously, Paul Joyce, who's very reliable for Liverpool, say that 120 million is the fee that he's hearing that Liverpool would be happy to pay. There's been other sources obviously saying that Liverpool don't think their initial bid of 110 million is too far. You've obviously mentioned 130 million. I've kind of always been in it's going to be around that fee. 150 million just seems that seems like a player who is, your Lamine Yamal's, your Kylian Mbappe's, and while Alexander Isak is obviously a world-class striker, coupled with everything that's going on around his situation, what's going on with Newcastle, they've obviously spent 200 million this summer already. It's kind of that 150 million fee. Was that actually what Newcastle realistically wanted, or is it always kind of be, if we get a decent fee with decent structure, it could be 130-ish, which it might be end up kind of being around that fee?
Yeah, I think 130 does sound more feasible than the 150. I think the 150, I mean, the sort of backstory for that for me is at one stage Newcastle were kind of slapping astronomical sort of figures on certain players because of the PSR situation. And basically, I think there's been a lot of brinksmanship in this window, and Liverpool saying they weren't going to come back. That's an example of it. And I think Newcastle at one stage getting it out there that they wanted 150 million for Isak is probably another example of that. So I don't think it was ever realistic. I mean, if you look at the record sales, there's nobody close to that in the Premier League. So if Newcastle managed to get 130 million for Isak, then it would be, a phenomenal fee to get, which could be reinvested. And, it would be a heavy price tag for Isak to take into the start of his Liverpool career as well, because that is a big fee. But, I guess he's weighed up all of these scenarios in his head and knows that that's what he wants. So that's where we are with it.
Yeah, I think one other thing that's kind of been very interesting to me is I'm obviously a lot more on the fan side of things. I see fan reactions more than anything, and I'm sure I think you can't miss it, even if you're a journalist or potentially even a player or at the club. There has been a very toxic vibe amongst the fan base about this, which is very understandable from Newcastle fans, because obviously your best player's pushing for a move, and he's been very public. Liverpool went through something similar with Felipe Coutinho, but the differences are kind of there. At the club, is this between the clubs? Is this kind of does it transpire? Because obviously you was there as well at St James's Park. I'm sure against Liverpool, the atmosphere was electric. Even watching through the TV, you could see how much the players were up for it and how much the fans were up for it. And, how much that relates to the whole situation. I'm sure it played some part, especially for the fans. Are the clubs looking at it similar to the fans, or is it a very kind of more respectful nature between everybody? Because obviously, the Saudi Public Investment Fund tried to sign Michael Edwards to run their footballing project a few months ago. Obviously, PIF and FSG work together on Live Golf, and obviously Eddie Howe and Richard Hughes work together at Bournemouth. I've always been under the bus that the relationship between the clubs is very, very good, or it's at least a mutual consent. Liverpool never came back in with a bid after the 110 million, maybe as a sign of respect for Newcastle to say, look, we'll let you kind of do what you need to do. But is it kind of like what the fans, or is that very much just a social media kind of rivalry that has spawned?
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely the relationship between Eddie Howe, Edwards, and Hughes is going to be strong because as you say, at one stage Edwards could have ended up at Newcastle. Certainly, there was a will from some people at the club to get him because they are the best. They are the best of the business. I mean, Liverpool have what Newcastle lack at the moment, which is someone in the boardroom who's the expert on transfers and recruitment. So I think the respect will always be there. As for the other sort of relationships, I mean, social media, as you say, it's not always the best measure and stick for feelings. And as you say, the atmosphere of the night was unbelievable. Passions were riding high, and they always are when Liverpool and Newcastle meet. There's just some sort of chemistry between the two clubs where it's just always absolutely jumping. Um, I just guess it's because it's two cities where everyone loves the football, they're passionate, it's working class background, and I mean, I don't think that. All I'll say is that I've been to Liverpool many times, and it's one of I've been as a supporter, and I've been obviously in the journalism world there as well, and it's one of the cities where you can go into Liverpool. You can go walk around where you want. You can mix with people. You can go for a drink. You could wear your Newcastle United shirt in any pub in Liverpool, and I think you'd be welcomed with open arms. To an extent, obviously, football rivalry aside, I think you go in there, and it's probably not a place where, when you compare it to other places in the Premier League, if you walk around with a shirt on from your club, you might get a bit of hot reception in some places, and you couldn't do that. But I think Liverpool, when Newcastle go to play Liverpool and Everton, there's always that sort of football fan respect going on. So I don't think it kind of transfers into the real world. But yeah, I mean, this, if any transfer drama was going to test the two fan bases, then it's this one. So hopefully it comes to an end, and Newcastle get the players they want, and Isak gets what he wants.
Yeah, I mean, I lived in Newcastle for 4 years, and it's definitely the most similar city that I've lived in to kind of Liverpool. Obviously, that's kind of might be an up north thing, but it was just, to me, it was so crazy that it went from you guys winning the EFL Cup and Liverpool fans congratulating Newcastle fans. It was like, oh, fair play, what a game. If anyone's, if anyone won it, I'm happy Newcastle have won it. Obviously, 70 years since a trophy, and it's obviously the online fans are the loudest, and Liverpool were willing to help Newcastle out with Anthony Gordon last season, which obviously that Minter ended up moving, so that didn't transpire. But it's it's a crazy situation, considering 3 months ago, kind of online fans were all had a massive respect for each other. But it's I don't know. It's just it's been a mental transfer, mental transfer saga, and to be honest, I'm kind of glad it's over because it's dragged on for so long. I'm not sure about how you are feeling up there.
Yeah, I mean, it's as I say, it's tested everybody. It's tested sort of everyday relationships, between the club and the press. And we were over in South Korea last month, and we were like seeing it all unfold because we were basically with the squad. We were at the team hotel, we were training, we were talking to Eddie Howe, and we were like there as it was all unfolding. And we were first on the scene, if you like, and relaying all the information back to the UK. And as I say, it's tested everybody. And I've never known the story. I've covered some big transfer stories, but I've never known anything that's kind of rocked the kind of the scale as much as this in terms of interest. It's just had so much, and will continue to do so until Isak gets the move that he's looking for.
Yeah, it was. I mean, if you can't kind of answer it, but it was very much like the one of the interesting things for me was when obviously Isaac's statement came out, and the club obviously, denied that straight away, saying, no agreement was in place. And then Eddie Howe kind of seemed to almost confirm it the next day in a press conference, obviously saying, talks did take place, and obviously he didn't say an agreement was reached, but obviously football's very, very, very different. I don't understand why players. We're talking about ridiculous money here. It's stupid money that's being talked about, and obviously Newcastle want to get every penny that they deserved with this. I it's one, why hasn't the agent put in kind of a release clause? Obviously, clubs maybe don't want that. So, gentlemen agreements are more common. We saw it with Alexis McAllister and Brighton, that they had a £35 million gentleman's agreement and it was accepted. But you do always obviously run a risk, don't you, of this happening? Both sides have had a conversation, which Eddie Howe has seemingly confirmed, and then Isaac maybe took it one way, the club have took it another way, and Eddie Howe's kind of stuck in the middle. And I think it just got so messy. It's like maybe the club, and Isaac in the future might look at this and learn a big lesson from it. And I think a lot of clubs should do that as well.
Yeah, I mean, it was actually my question in the press conference when he confirmed those talks, and I think he was the thing with Eddie Howe is he likes to be as honest as he can be within the sort of framework of football transfers, and if he can't answer it, he won't. But that was a genuine question, and he gave a genuine answer, and I think everyone appreciated that. And I think now, in terms of the club statement and what Isak said, then yeah, maybe he's basing it off previous conversations with people who worked for the club in the past. That's obviously been a big turnaround in. We've had like two sport directors in Paul Mitchell and Dan Ashworth. We've had various directors coming in and leaving the club during Isak's time at Newcastle. So there's a lot of people who could have told him a lot of different things. But I think ultimately, without him confirming it himself, I think he's asked for, if a certain offer of a certain price came in, could he go? And obviously that bid came in and it must have matched what he was saying. But in terms of what was written down, in terms of clauses, that must obviously be a different thing. So it's just it's a crazy story. And eventually I think Isak will come out in the press. I mean, I think he's got a press conference lined up next week with Sweden, and you might hear more. He probably, if we're all had to take a guess at it at the moment, he's probably going to be a Liverpool player by then. So you would expect that he's going to be able to say more. But yeah, it's a complete transfer saga, and the statements that came out one after another, that just added another little chapter to it all.
I know we could have had a documentary on this. It would have been unbelievable. And I'm sure we'll in 10 years' time, when Alexander Isak's retired and he's maybe on Sky Sports, we might hear his truthful side of the story. But I don't think we'll probably be hearing the full truth anytime soon, unfortunately.
Yeah,
But
I mean, it's just it's got like sort of a few similarities in a way to the Andy Carroll saga. Now, Andy Carroll, I covered him coming through the youth team at Newcastle. But to cut a long story short, when it got to the day when he signed for Liverpool, I can tell you for a fact, when he woke up and went into training that day and he was having his breakfast, that wasn't happening. By the end of the day, he was getting sort of put in a helicopter and, flown over to Merseyside. And it did happen. And I remember when he was a Liverpool player, talking to him in the early hours of the next day, and he gave me the full sort of story about that. He didn't want to leave Newcastle, all that sort of stuff. But things can happen in the window. So yeah, in terms of transfer sagas, it's right up there.
Yeah. Finally, kind of more from a fan point of view, you know, as we've already mentioned, it's going to be a kind of toxic atmosphere, and obviously fans are very, very emotional. We've seen it with, Fernando Torres and Chelsea got booed until the cows come home when he come back at Chelsea. Even Luis Suarez at Anfield, he left on very good terms with the club. People consider him probably technically one of the best Liverpool players ever. When he come to Anfield, he got booed. The love was kind of, maybe after he kind of retired, especially with Torres. Torres has kind of been welcomed back. People have seemingly forgot about what Coutinho did as well. Do you think Newcastle will be that forgiven? Obviously, he's going to be playing them at least 2 times a season. There's potential, obviously, in the cups. It's uh, how do you think the fans are going to react to this? Is this going to be, especially when he goes to St James's Park? Obviously, he's avoided that this year so far. Um, Next year, maybe feelings have simmered down a little bit, but are you still expecting a very fiery reaction from the Newcastle fan base?
Yeah, I think naturally, that's probably what will happen the next time he comes to Newcastle. But at the end of the day, look, Andy Cole left Newcastle to go to Manchester United in '95, and every time he came back to the club, he got a hot reception, wearing a Man United shirt, as you can expect. David Ginola went to Tottenham and Aston Villa after that, and when he come back to Newcastle, again he got the hot reception because Newcastle fans obviously didn't want him to leave. But you don't boo bad players. I don't think that's that's the old saying, isn't it? That it's always the players that you don't want to leave will get the hot reception. But to answer your question, Andy Cole is now in Newcastle United's Hall of Fame. David Ginola also has been in Newcastle's Hall of Fame, and they've both been back at the club for various functions. And I think it will simmer down eventually. Now, Alexander Isak scored what turned out to be the winner in the Carabao Cup final against Liverpool, and you're not going to forget that moment in a hurry. So if Newcastle never win anything again for another 70 years, he will be the guy who scored the important goal at Wembley that got Newcastle a cup. So, yeah, I think at the minute, tension is high. But if it settles down, Newcastle get the players they want, get the results they want. It could be interesting.
Yeah, I think if Watermolder becomes the player you're hoping as well, I think that eases would ease the sting a lot for for the fans. The Liverpool now kind of look at Coutinho as Van Dijk and Alisson. If Coutinho didn't happen, Van Dijk and Alisson don't happen, and Van Dijk is now a top 5 legend ever in the club, and Alisson's not far behind him as well. So it's maybe it might not be as long, especially if Watermolder kind of becomes what he looks like he will be. So
Yeah, I mean, again, to use Andy Cole as the example, he left the club in '95. Eventually, Newcastle replaced him with Les Ferdinand, and the rest is history. He had a great time at Newcastle, so it's an opportunity. When someone leaves, it's always an opportunity for somebody else. That's the beauty of football, and you've seen it many times at Liverpool, and it'll be the same at Newcastle.
yeah, definitely. Well, perfect. I think we'll leave it there. Lee, I massively appreciate you coming on. Obviously, check out his socials. It'll be in the description below: Twitter, YouTube, all that. But yeah, thank you very much for joining us today. Again, if you have joined the stream for the first time, make sure you do leave a like on the video and subscribe